I never thought I'd actually meet someone from social media in real life, let alone go on a date with him. But after weeks of chatting late into the night, sending memes, and bonding over our love for the same obscure indie band, I finally agreed to meet him. His name was Jake. We decided to keep it casual and met at a little coffee shop downtown, the kind with fairy lights and mismatched furniture. I remember being so nervous that I arrived 15 minutes early, just to compose myself. When he walked in, I recognized him immediately. Tall, a bit scruffy, with that same shy smile I had seen in his photos. But seeing him in person felt completely different, more real, more nerve-wracking. The first few minutes were awkward. We both laughed a little too much and stumbled over our words. But as the conversation flowed about everything from our favorite books to why pineapple on pizza isn't as bad as people say, I began to relax. And for the first time in a while, I felt genuinely connected to someone. That coffee date turned into a walk in the park, and the walk turned into dinner at a taco truck nearby. We didn't want the night to end. Looking back, I'm glad I took the chance. Meeting someone online can be weird, even scary, but sometimes, just sometimes, it leads to something real. I wasn't looking for anything serious when I started talking to him online. Just someone to laugh with, maybe vent to after a long day. But from the very first message, something felt different. His words were warm, thoughtful, like he actually saw me, not just my photos, but me. His name was Daniel. We talked every night for almost a month. He'd ask about my day, send songs that reminded him of our conversations, and somehow always knew the exact thing to say when I needed it most. Eventually, the idea of meeting in person stopped feeling scary and started feeling exciting. Chose a quiet cafe by the lake for our first date. I remember standing by the window, watching the rain, my heart pounding as I waited. And then, there he was, holding a small bouquet of white daisies, slightly wet from the drizzle, smiling like he was just as nervous as I was. Our conversation was easy, like we'd known each other forever. Every smile, every glance, every little silence between words, it all felt natural. Like falling into a rhythm I didn't know I had been missing. After coffee, we walked along the lake under one umbrella. He held it above us, letting his shoulder get soaked just so I could stay dry. At one point, he reached for my hand, and I let him. It was soft, gentle, but electric, in the quietest way. When the date ended, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'm really glad you said yes." And honestly, so was I that night. I went to bed smiling, knowing I had just started something I'd never forget. After our first date, everything felt lighter. My days were a little brighter, and I found myself smiling for no reason. Daniel texted me the next morning, "I haven't stopped thinking about last night. Want to see each other again this weekend?" Of course I said yes. This time, he planned everything. He picked me up just before sunset. When I opened the door, he was standing there with that familiar soft smile, the kind that makes your stomach flutter. He wore a navy sweater that matched his eyes, and held a picnic basket in one hand. "Hope you're hungry," he said. We drove to a quiet hill outside the city, one he used to go to as a kid. The view was incredible, a stretch of glowing skyline, the trees below catching the last golden light of the day. He laid out a blanket, and we sat side by side as he unpacked everything. Sandwiches, he made himself. Fruit, sparkling lemonade, and even tiny brownies he admitted he might have accidentally burned a little. It was perfect. As the sun dipped lower, we talked about things we hadn't touched before. Our childhoods, our fears, dreams, and the strange, beautiful ways life had brought us here. At one point, I noticed he was looking at me instead of the view. "What?" I asked, half laughing. He shook his head slowly and said, "I just can't believe someone like you exists." There was a moment of silence, not awkward, just full of feeling. Then, softly, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed or nervous like first kisses sometimes are. It was slow, sweet, full of meaning, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. And this was it. We stayed until the stars came out, wrapped in one blanket, our fingers intertwined, hearts quietly sinking to the same rhythm. I didn't want the night to end, and in my heart, I started to wonder, What if this isn't just the beginning of something special? What if it's the beginning of everything? By the time our third date came around, something had already shifted. We weren't just two people getting to know each other anymore. We were slowly becoming part of each other's world. Daniel surprised me again. He didn't tell me where we were going, just said, "Dress warm, bring your favorite song, and trust me." So I did. He picked me up right before dusk, and we drove out of the city again, farther this time. We didn't talk much during the drive, but the silence felt soft, not awkward, just comfortable. He held my hand on the gear shift the whole way. Eventually he pulled off onto a gravel road that led to an open field surrounded by trees. In the middle of it, under a sky slowly turning purple and gold, was a fire pit already crackling, a couple of lawn chairs, and a small speaker resting on a picnic table. I turned to him, touched and a little in awe. "You did all this?" He nodded, smiling. "I wanted tonight to feel like something we'll remember." We sat under the stars, wrapped in one thick blanket, the fire dancing in front of us. He played my favorite song first, I played his, and then we played one we hadn't heard before, letting the lyrics settle between us, quiet and heavy and beautiful. At one point he looked at me, really looked, and asked, "What scares you the most about falling in love?" I hesitated. No one had ever asked me that so directly before, but with him, I felt safe. "Losing myself," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "Me too," he whispered. "But I think if it's with the right person, you don't get lost. You just grow together." We stayed like that for a long time, leaning into each other, listening to music, letting the night hold us. And when he kissed me this time slower, deeper, it wasn't just romantic. It was real, intimate, a quiet promise neither of us had to say out loud. That night, as he drove me home, he reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm falling for you," he said softly, without looking away from the road. And in my heart, I already knew. I was falling to **. It started with a simple text from Daniel on a Thursday morning. "How would you feel about disappearing with me for a weekend?" I smiled before I even finished reading. We packed light. He picked me up Saturday morning with coffee, a playlist of our favorite songs, and that boyish excitement in his eyes that always melted me. The drive was long, winding through forests and sleepy backroads, and every mile felt like we were leaving the rest of the world behind. He'd rented a tiny cabin by a lake, just us, the quiet and the sound of nature. No Wi-Fi, barely any signal. "I figured we could use some uninterrupted time," he said. And he was right. The cabin was cozy wood-paneled walls, a little fireplace, one big bed with flannel sheets, and windows that looked out over still water. As soon as we arrived, we kicked off our shoes, opened a bottle of red wine, and sank into the quiet like it had been waiting for us that night. After a dinner he cooked okay. He cut vegetables like a child with safety scissors. But it was adorable. We sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching the stars shimmer on the surface of the lake. He reached for my hand, then brought it to his lips. "Being here with you," he said softly, "feels like the world finally slowed down enough for me to breathe." I looked at him, this beautiful, thoughtful man who had entered my life through a screen and somehow become the safest place. I knew, and suddenly, the words were there, rising in my chest, undeniable. "I love you," I whispered. He turned toward me so gently, his eyes wide, stunned for half a second. Then he pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "I love you too. I think I've been falling since the moment you said hi." We didn't need fireworks. The way he held me, the way we melted into each other that night in front of the fire, was its own kind of magic. We spent the rest of the weekend like that, cooking, laughing, slow dancing, barefoot in the cabin, waking up tangled in each other, like we'd always belonged that way. And when Sunday came, and we packed our bags to return to the real world, I wasn't afraid, because I knew something real had begun, and this time I wasn't falling alone.